Welcome back to Learning Matters. I'm Doug Wooldridge, your host, and today for our 20th episode, we're going to take a look back on the first few months of the podcast. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to the very first episode of Learning Matters, the podcast where we do a deep dive into the world of learning and development. So, without further ado, we welcome Debbie Wooldridge, CEO and founder of ttcInnovations, to the podcast. Let's get to the interview. We want to welcome to the podcast Debbie Wooldridge. First off, I just want to thank you for agreeing to be our first guest on the podcast. I know your schedule is a little packed these days, so thank you for coming on. And I'd like to take this opportunity for you to tell us a story of how you went from working as a corporate instructional designer to becoming the founder and CEO of ttcInnovations. Can we start with what got you into corporate learning, the corporate learning space, just to begin with?
So yeah, actually I had zero background in instructional design and zero understanding of adult learning. I came out of college with a background in early childhood education, and my degree was in business management for childcare organizations, and all of my early career was around building a not-for-profit childcare organization for school-age kids. And one of the things that I think is important for people to know is that childcare is so important, but it is so underfunded. And that was the problem, is that I was consistently trying to find funds to run the organization, to keep enough teachers available for the kids, to make a really good environment for the kids. And so that required grant writing, which I also had zero background in, but as one does, you just kind of do what you need to do. And for the longest time, the grants were for playground equipment, supplies,
Sure.
Things for the kids, and that was great. But federal legislation changed, the president changed, and the focus on what they were willing to fund changed. And all of a sudden, they didn't fund things that were specifically for the kids anymore, and instead focused the funding around adult education and preparing people to be better at working with the kids, which is honestly a really good idea, because you can overcome a bad environment with children, but you cannot overcome a bad teacher in a classroom.
Ultimately, there's just, from the start, there's massive changes going on at this company. And not only did your original manager not be there during the beginning, you're also having a brand new CEO come in. So what is it like dealing with that type of chaos of a company going through a reorg?
I tell you, it was, for me, the most impactful experience, and unfortunately not in a good way. Because what was happening with the organization is they had had a CEO who had been with the company for a really long time. And he was super committed to the children and the families that he serviced. He was so committed to the employees. And it was this very warm and welcoming environment that I interviewed for. And my first couple of weeks were this warm and welcoming experience. And people made me feel very comfortable very fast, which was great, because new person, no manager, I needed that type of support. And then the winds changed, and he retired, and they brought in a new CEO. The board of that for-profit agency brought in a new CEO with the purpose of making the company more profitable, more efficient. And there are CEOs who are hired specifically to go from company to company to company, and their job is to come in here, create change, make all kinds of different strategies, do an efficiency audit, and then implement a lot of change, and then they move on, and then they bring in a new CEO. So it was a very planned experience that the board had put into play. The problem is this is a organization, company that is supporting people.
Right.
The output of what they're doing is taking care of people's most important possessions, their children. And so when the leadership of that organization doesn't represent the level of service, care, and nurture, you have a lot of chaos happening. And in some companies and in some structures, that chaos might be good. It might be the fire to light people up. In this situation, it definitely was not. But there was one shining light that happened out of that, in that the new CEO brought in a vice president of human resources, Patty Powell, my all-time favorite person in the whole universe. And if I could ever aspire to be so great, I would be Patty Powell in my next life. She's this amazing person. She came in with the new CEO, and she sat in and really took the time to get to know me, got to know my vision of what I wanted to do with the training department. And ironically, one of the things that I had to do as training department was to send everybody to this executive leadership back to nature moment kind of thing. I'm sure you've
Very fun.
There's these retreat centers.
Okay.
You actually go up into the mountains. You stay in a cabin. It's very rustic. There's no email. There's no phone service.
This sounds
And
right
my
up
job
my
was
alley.
Yeah, you wouldn't enjoy it. So my job was to book people into this, and I had to organize them based on, there was a tiered level of who was expected to go. So, first tier was the CEO and the VP levels. The area VPs, they all went as this first group. And then I was scheduling the next group, and I was supposed to be in the next group, but I was busy. So I wasn't able to schedule myself. So I kept putting my name further and further down the list. But
today we've got a very exciting episode for you. We're going to be talking about AI and L&D. Okay, I want to welcome Eric Brigette to our podcast here. He's a part of our Dash team and is a learning experience designer. And ultimately, we kind of want to get into a little bit of the discussion about AI tools that he's using today to make training more storytelling as opposed to kind of that standard style of training. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Yeah. So for example, like we've done projects where, a lot of projects where it's very much on brand. And so you might be able to have a character that in a scenario that's, like something like the business character, articulate storyline type, safe kind of business professional. And that's sort of the extent of creativity. Whereas we've also done projects that are kind of more metaphorical in their teaching. So like, create a game, an escape room environment that had a Da Vinci mansion context, and so it was a very playful environment where it was built for an annual event for like chest physician conference. And so, it was meant to be kind of a creative sort of experiential piece of learning, but very much like a metaphor kind of a situation. And so, so for some of those backgrounds, like within this Da Vinci mansion, and some of those the materials of the look and feel of that course, I used Midjourney to kind of create that environment. And so it had kind of an old Renaissance sort of vintagey antique look on. So I think another one that we did was a disaster course. It was called Disaster in Franklin County. And again, I think the point is like not to say, okay, I'm going to use generative AI on this. It's really thinking of it in terms of ingredients. And so maybe the majority of the ingredients that I'm using are from Shutterstock library, but there's some limitations within that where you just can't find something that has the mood or the tone.
Right.
And so I found, I used a lot of stock imagery within this, but for, occasional kind of the shot of the small town after a thunderstorm, it's hard to find that in a stock photo library. And,
right.
And so, and then, some of these characters are stock photos and some of them are generated stock photos or generated images.
So Midjourney allows you to take like a reference photo and just have a true starting point and then go from there.
You can. It's really it's not like you can build a library of images. Like ChatGPT where you can kind of have a conversation. It doesn't really work like that in long form yet. But it does. But you can have a style reference.
Gotcha.
And to some degree, that's helpful. From just the best practices or kind of tips that work. That can be helpful if you have kind of a like if I said, like a storage shot, and I want it to look like this. You can make a style reference, but with text prompts. And so with this screen, the key is like you have sort of a low light, big window in the text prompt to say, okay, I want an interior with a big window overlooking the city. And then I essentially took that kind of moody interior. So it kind of looks like a cinema still, right? And
very much so.
And it does that really well. Midjourney does like moody, emotive imagery really well, compared to stock photography, which tends to have things that are like really fully lit and low on drama, but like very kind of safe visually. And so,
I love that. It is very safe.
Yeah.
Funny.
You're incentivized to do that so that it's like, you just something that's widely usable that just doesn't have too much, emotional communication. It's just kind of like, here's the thing that you asked for. And so Midjourney does the opposite really well, I would say. I mean, it does a lot of things, but it fills in that space of, I need something with like long shadows and like high contrast, moody, cinematic still, and then fill in the blank of what the thing is. And it can do that really well. And then in this case, and almost everything I use, I have to go into Photoshop and just kind of either simplify or tweak, or sometimes there's just a little weirdness. And actually what I did, if you kind of rewind a little bit before the cell phone comes up.
Sure.
And actually what I did in that area, if you, pause there, you can kind of see flashes of lightning. And so what I did was I had kind of a foreground of the image, and then I made it transparent, like for where the windows are. And so in Storyline, there's a video of a lightning storm in the back, and in the foreground is like a PNG, like a transparent image, so that you have so it feels like a video, but it's really just sort of a video in the background and an image in the foreground. And then
very cool.
And then those little clickable elements, like you could pick up the keys to kind of initiate the action. I think you click on the phone first to kind of say like, oh, I got to check my messages. There's this big storm. And in the story of this learning, it's like, okay, disaster preparedness. And then we each have to play our role, and the course kind of goes through the different vantage points of being a disaster response. And so, again, it's back to that point of we can tell better stories. And so it just kind of draws you in, create that story in a way that's a little bit more drama, or at least that's the idea, is that you can have that opportunity to do that.
Today, we've got a very fun show for you all. I've got TTC Innovations VP of Sales, Teresa Chiaputo, as well as one of TTC's relationship managers, Brady Grover, here to tell us about the story of how the subscription learning service came to be and how it can be a fantastic option for clients, big and small. Let's get to the interview. I want to get a little bit into the subscription learning services, which is why we're all here today, that TTC is now offering. Can you give me just a little bit of a rundown of what that service is and maybe how it's a little bit different than the other type of offerings that TTC had in place before?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. And the way that I like to explain this to clients is I say, think about your Hulu subscription. You start with, you're wanting a service of a TV service. In this case, you're wanting some instructional design services to help you build custom learning. So in the Hulu subscription, you have a base subscription that you can start with, and then you can add things onto it. You can add no commercials, you can add Disney Plus, whatever the case might be. And then you pay for that subscription each month until you decide you don't want it anymore. Well, that's how this works. What we are giving you is instructional design expertise and resources to help you build custom learning. And so you decide as a client each month, what kind of time do you need for that person to be part of your team working on any particular project for you? And then how many months do you want to work with us? And so it becomes a very simple way to understand, kind of, particularly in for new clients when they're coming in, if they haven't experienced this before, it allows them to really pick a minimal amount of months or amount of hours, work with us, get used to us, learn to love us, and in a short period of time without having a full commitment into a larger project. So I hope that answers the question a little bit about subscription. I try to kind of put it in layman's terms of what we all do in our personal lives. How does it differ? That question really is an interesting question, because the subscription service in and of itself differs for every single client. Every client makes it their own. But I think the big difference is that you have the flexibility within that subscription to have different types of resources based on what you're wanting to accomplish in any particular month. So if in month 1 you want to have a couple of job aids created, we provide a resource to do that has that expertise, whether it's in the topic and then the development of the tool. And maybe in month 2 you've got some video editing that needs to be done to a course that you currently have, and it needs to be updated. It's a little bit different skill set. At that point, we can switch things up. You get another person in that has the skill set you need, and you can go through that each month or by project. And so you really have a really vast array of resources at hand for you based on what you're trying to accomplish. And people love that.
Yeah, and ultimately, it sounds like what you're able to do with this service and offer with this is flexibility, and really be able to be there for a client who may not know exactly what they want get month to month, because things change. We know with COVID, things change almost, on a dime.
Change.
So how did this idea come about? As I understand it, this was Brady. This was something that you initially brought to the table. So can you tell me a little bit about the story behind it?
I think it's interesting and kind of fun, but it kind of takes us back to the end, kind of Q4 2022. Throughout that year, working with my clients, just kind of listening to them and having, open dialogue, open conversations. I started to see some common threads and maybe some challenges in what they were doing and how they were working with us. And so I kind of, took that and started thinking to myself, is there something that we can do to improve their overall experience with TTC and just make their lives easier? And so kind of taking some common insights that I gathered from them, some of the things I was hearing was, going through project approvals was becoming a little bit challenging. Now, when you have 1 or 2 projects here and there, it's not such a big deal, but when you're dealing with dozens of projects, it becomes somewhat burdensome. Or cumbersome. And so, that and, having to go through proposals, pricing, approvals, contracts for each little project becomes a little tedious. Not knowing what their spend would look like, in relationship to their forecast was a challenge for them. And then not having that flexibility, kind of what Teresa was mentioning. And so kind of stepping back and, kind of on a personal note, I was taking all of that and kind of implementing that into something I love to do, which is running. And so I was taking that feedback and kind of going over it in my head as I was running of what could we do differently? How can we address some of these challenges? And so I would take notes on runs and started to kind of build a preliminary framework of what I thought could work to kind of help alleviate some of what I had been hearing, and it kind of just morphed from there.
Today, I'm joined by Nicole Whitney, the Director of Talent for ttcInnovations. She spent over a decade successfully sourcing, attracting, and retaining top-tier talent in the L&D industry. She excels in developing innovative recruitment strategies and collaborating seamlessly with stakeholders at all levels to understand hiring needs and deliver tailored recruitment solutions. And what are some of the challenges in attracting or maybe just finding that great candidate for L&D?
Oh, this is a big question. There's a lot of challenges. I would say that culture plays such a big component in identifying the right resource. But in terms of going back to the attracting piece, there are a lot of things that you can do as a company to make sure that you're attractive and attracting the right talent. So first and foremost is, being organized in the upfront. Don't be too quick off the draw and just put up a job posting. You are not going to be very successful that way. Conduct the analysis ahead of time. Where are there gaps? What is this role filling for your organization? And so specifically in the L&D space, do you need a jack of all trades? Do you need someone who's very specialized? What are you needing for this to push your organization forward? What expertise does that require? And so not only do you need to have your ducks in a row in terms of a role description, but understanding how this plays a role in your organization. So is this person, very client facing? Like what does the role entail? Not just the task list. And so again, starting with what you're posting, what you're putting out there, is it clear and concise? Are applicants, candidates going to look at your role description and say, I fit that bill? Or that's a 12-page role description, I'm never going to fit that. Or it's a one-liner and they're like, I don't know what this role is. So out of the gate, kind of setting those clear expectations, I think that's a general theme across good recruiters, is being clear, concise, and communicative. I mean, just making sure that you're setting those clear expectations out of the gate. So in terms of attracting, there's things that you can do even, again, before a job goes live, to make sure that you're set up for success.
And not just you, but the candidates are set up for success too, because you give them that amount of information, they're walking into it with, a very good understanding, as opposed to, well, let's just see what happens.
Absolutely. I mean, let them self-qualify in a way. Again, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not utilizing application questions and, again, good role descriptions, even going down to where you're posting. Have a diverse lineup of different locations, whether that's, casting a broader net to get a more diverse applicant base. There's a lot of different ways that you can approach and attract, again, the type of candidate you're looking for. But in terms of challenges finding kind of the right talent, I think a lot of it comes down to culture, like I said. I think that it's one thing to just, go down the matrix and say, yep, they can do X, Y, and Z. That doesn't mean they're the right fit for the role. It could be. Right. But there's a lot of things that you have to think about that impact your organization far more if they can do things on a role description. So EQ, can they communicate well? Can they receive feedback well? There's a lot of components that aren't specifically, tasks that you're going to want to look for to identify the right talent. And knowing your organization is the biggest piece. Who they're working with, what the dynamic of the team looks like, and then going from there. So it's a lot of different components when you're kind of looking at the challenges of identifying the right talent. But again, EQ, culture, having clear expectations out of the gate are all going to play a big role in that.
We have a very exciting show today. We're joined by Mallory Steele. She's an instructional designer, entrepreneur, founder and CEO of Growductive Consulting, founder of Black in L&D, a professional community supporting and connecting over 4,000 Black professionals in the talent, training, and learning and development industry, as well as founding the Learning Exchange that provides a nurturing space for first-time Black speakers to foster their ability to take on the industry speaking circuit. She's going to walk us through how she got into the world of learning and development. How did you go from being like full-time mom to being a full-time mom who also has to work a full-time job?
Yeah. So I give so much credit to moms in general. I just feel like from the moms who work through their pregnancies, I didn't do that. I don't know how you guys do it. I have so much respect. And I want everyone who is not pregnant, have never been pregnant, to just be sensitive to pregnant women at work.
Yes, please.
I don't know. I don't know how they do it. But the blessing in disguise of a divorce is that we co-parent. So I have my kids every other week. And so I can't say I'm similar to other moms who have their kids full-time and they went from full-time home or whatever it is to full-time working mom, and the motherhood duties never end. So it's a little bit different for me because I have a very busy week, and then it calms down and I get to recover. And then I have, a week later, another busy week with my kids. So I feel like it's been trial and error. I feel like I've done things in some grace. I think my kids have given me a lot of grace, but the working from home is the biggest benefit to me. Like the idea of going into work as a single mom, and this is just like a little plug to anybody listening who has control over remote work, is like, let the people work from home.
Yes. Yes.
Not everyone wants to, and I get it. It's fine. They love the energy of an office, right? The buzz of it, the relationship building, all that. I enjoy that too, to an extent, but having the benefit to say, my kid is sick.
Yeah.
And I don't have to figure something out, and I don't have to, go to the doctor to get a doctor's note when I'm like, they just need to rest, and now they're worse because we're in a freaking hospital.
Right.
It's like those small things of like, it just being able to like pop in and do some laundry, and, switch the laundry over, or like throw something, in the oven, and just, it's very helpful to be able to work from home. And I feel like that's a benefit to me of going from stay-at-home mom to full-time working mom. But honestly, the biggest challenge is probably just usually my youngest son, the little comments of like, you're always working, you're always on your computer. And that's the downside of working from home, because that's what it looks like, especially during the summer. Yeah. Right? It looks like you're always on your computer. I'm like, actually, I just logged on. I just logged on, but you want a smoothie. So because of that you're complaining. So yeah, I feel like I want to give you better answers, Doug, but honestly, that's the truth of it. It's, I don't have it as hard as a lot of moms because I don't have my kids full time. And so it gives a little bit of a break.
We have an awesome guest for today's show. We got Robin Sargent of Idle Talent and Idle Courses joining us today to talk about how she got into the world of learning and development and how she came to create Idle Courses, the only true academy for folks looking to become corporate instructional designers and veterans of the industry that want to find ways to improve and showcase their top-tier talents. What lessons would you share for those who are maybe just getting into the industry and thinking about making a career change, maybe from like higher ed to adult learning?
Yeah, I mean, I have quite a few tips that I would share for those that are new. I think one of the first things that people have to take into consideration is the mindset. I think a lot of times what I see, we've enrolled over 3,000 students over these last 5 years. And of course, we do a lot of data analysis and users and student surveys and things like that. And really a lot of anecdotal, like just talking to the students and all those kinds of things. And the number one thing that I find that a lot of them struggle with at the beginning is a lot of fear around the challenge of making that transition. And with that fear comes these internal voices that say, I'm not good enough, I'm an imposter here, it's self-doubt. But what you have to remember is that's completely normal. It used to be we had the fear of the challenge of, the woolly mammoth, and so that would help us, overcome those challenges or stay away, right? Stay away, fight or flight. But now our challenges are different, right? The challenge is that I'm going to transition from one career to the next, which still comes with fear. Or another part of it looks like perfectionism. Like I can't show anybody my work to get feedback on it because it's not good enough. Yeah. And so the very first thing that I would say is like, do it messy. Just progress over perfection. You've got to learn and then actually create in order to really do the things, which is get something out there to get feedback on, in order to master anything, whether it's sports, medicine, academics, and most certainly learning design.
Very well
That's my
put.
first one. If you want me to rattle off more, I can, but that's
go
the
ahead.
number one.
Yeah. What would be number two?
What would be number two? So once you start doing it messy, I think the other part is it has to be about doing the work and knowing what this job entails.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people think that the job entails, I create training to make people's lives better. And yeah, you do. I think that there is another part of it that people get surprised about, and I'd rather you just know about it up front. And that is that you are solving performance gaps in the organizations that are directly, usually, I mean, if we're not talking about compliance training, right? Besides that are directly tied to the revenue of your organization. And so if you are thinking more along those lines, you're going to be a better designer, right? You're going to put the problem and the complex task at the center of your instruction. You're going to do the analysis that's necessary. You're going to track, the return on investment. And you're also going to show up like a business person and know that everything is negotiable. And I think a lot of times people show up and they're like, oh, I'll just, take the instructions and whatever they want me to do and just do a really good job of doing it. But when you can show up as an expert in learning design, as a business professional, and understand where learning and development sits in an organization, you show up differently.
We have on David Wertz, who is a learning consultant for Intel with over 30 years of experience in the world of learning and development, to discuss all things staff augmentation and how he went from freelancer to staff aug to now working full-time as an employee for Intel, and the differences between freelancing and focusing on staff augmentation. What was the process that led you to jumping into the freelance world?
Well, I got that extended vacation program from Sprint, as I like to call it. And, it came right.
Very nice of them.
Yes, that was nice of them. And it came right before Christmas, which I thought was a nice touch. So, working with Debbie, she had just taken on or just, started up what was then known as technically training, and helping her get started. And she needed somebody to do some content development. And so, I helped her get that going. And, I can remember sitting at the dining room table thinking, where are we going to call this thing? It's, she had bought out technically writing. So, hey, technically training sounds like a good name. Hey, nobody had that on that website on the internet, so it's just those how things come around, and I'm sure she remembers it much different than I do. But we did that and really freelance for about a year, a little bit over a year. Working for I remember the customer was a large financial organization, and we worked for them for a ton of work. I just remember one time we were coming up at the end of the project, and I was taking the family on our first cruise we'd ever taken, and Richard and Courtney were, they had to be still in grade school, I'd guess. Or Richie maybe in middle school or junior high at that point. And I remember trying to upload files via a 3G mobile phone.
Oh,
overnight.
No. Oh,
because
no.
Somehow some last minute changes had been made, and I don't remember the instance, but I remember we drove from Kansas City to Dallas, then down to Galveston, and got to Galveston, had, I don't know, like 5 changes, type of thing. But, those 5 changes took all night to upload. And so just the difference in how technology has made our lives so much easier is what I've seen in the training industry.
Let's talk about that a little bit. You've been in the training industry for a long time.
Yeah, since dinosaurs roamed
What
the
have you?
earth.
Yes. And what have you seen that has been the biggest changes within the industry?
I think it's the ability to incorporate video and audio easier. It used to be that you would, you'd have to hire a camera crew to go out and shoot something, even if it was a conversation like this, you just, would be, you'd have several $1,000s worth of staff and gear and everything to shoot that. Now we can have a conversation just like this. I'm working on some training programs right now where we want to just say, hey, this is how you open a file, your in type of thing. And so instead of having the person go through an e-learning of doing a bunch of clicking, here, let's just show it to you in a video, and we record it in Teams.
Yep.
It's 30, 40 seconds worth of screen capture and audio with it, and boom, you're done with it. It'll take you longer to edit than it'll be worth it. So that's the cool thing. That's what I've seen with technology is that it has really increased our breadth of ways of doing business.
Today we have a great guest. We've got Vanessa Alzate, the CEO and founder of Anchor Training, as well as the owner and president of Kirkpatrick Partners, joining the show to discuss how TikTok and short-form content has transformed the way that people learn. Let's get to the interview. What if your company firewall blocks TikTok? So can you still incorporate this TikTok style or maybe mimic it in a way? Mm-hmm. How does that work?
Yeah. Do you want to know a secret? I don't edit in TikTok.
Yes.
I hate the TikTok editor personally.
Oh.
It is never, she and I have never 100% vibed. I've tried and I'm like, it just feels a little bit harder.
That's
I don't know, something about it I just didn't love. I actually edit most of my stuff in Instagram Reels because I'm a millennial and I hold Instagram hard. But this is not about using TikTok. It's about using that style as inspiration. So you can use any video editor that you have out there. And now a lot of them are catching up to this style, and they're actually starting to include as some of their features with fonts and transitions and annotations and things like that, stickers. They're starting to incorporate that TikTok style into their package. So I'll use Instagram. I will use CapCut or InShot as well. I played around with both of those. I like CapCut more than InShot. I created software, TikTok style software training using Camtasia. And it can be done in Articulate as well. It's about just getting the landscape, the slide sizing right.
Yeah.
And it could be a TikTok style. And actually I remember seeing this in the Articulate community, they have those challenges. They had a TikTok style challenge to create a TikTok style video using Articulate. So it's really more about taking that inspiration and just applying it to the video editor that you're using. So that way you don't have to deal with the firewall.
Gotcha. And how adaptable is this approach to different types of industries and different types of training needs?
Yeah, absolutely. So what I think it's honestly adaptable. I've seen it used for anything and everything, right? I've seen it used for software. I've seen it used for soft skills. I've seen it used for more process-oriented things. I've seen it used for plumbing hacks and electric hacks, right? It's about getting the content, giving the people just what they need. And then if you want to start utilizing it, a great place to start is just by taking maybe one key point and say in a longer form piece of content that you have and say, how can I take this key point and make a little TikTok style video out of it to tease someone into taking that longer form content, right? I've utilized our webinars, our free webinars that we do at Anchor Training, and we'll take the key points or key moments and just create clips from them. A lot of organizations have internal podcasts, right? You can use TikTok style videos for your internal podcasts as well to get people to listen to that full podcast. So I think that there's different ways that you can utilize it. I love the green screen effect. When we're talking about policy and things like that and trying to humanize policy, I think would be pretty cool. And then, like I said, there's the ability to do software, right? We don't need to see a mouse moving across the screen. What we just need to know is highlight where I have to click, tell me what the formula is if we're talking about Excel, and just give me the quick and dirty, what do I have to do? And if you want someone to follow to get inspiration, Miss Excel is number one for making something so boring and something that's still so challenging for many of us, your girl, number one, and making it understandable. And I will be on her TikTok for a really long time, mind blown, didn't think that Excel could do this.
We're joined on the podcast by Brian Melvin. Brian is an XR training lead, and he's here to talk about virtual reality and augmented reality in training. And can we dig in just a little bit about the differences between AR and VR, and not necessarily the tech and the hardware side of things, but how learners react to the different types of mediums?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to start with VR, and we'll talk a little about the hardware.
Sure.
So virtual reality, you put on a headset, and you're fully immersed in some virtual world. So you're no longer seeing the room you're in. Instead, you're now in whatever simulation or game or entertainment experience that you're trying to be in. That's a great way to try different environments and see different things that maybe you don't have access to in real life.
I mean, it takes that just-in-time training idea and puts it right in your hands. And I think that's one. I think it's a way to make sure that everyone's quite a bit safer when working on new gear or gear that they've only had maybe a month or two that they've worked with, or something that they've worked with in the past that they're just getting back into, so that you can immediately go, oh yeah, what lever do I pull? What button do I push here? And how do I make sure that my hands don't get crushed in this machine or something like that?
That's right. In fact,
I think it's exciting.
I will show you here. This is the tool that we use in my current company. This is the Microsoft HoloLens.
Very cool.
What you'll notice by this is that you can totally see through these lenses. So you're not obscured. You're not, things aren't hidden. So I can put this on, do my work, and pull up videos and guides and user manuals and checklists. I can have a Teams call. I can pull up call a subject matter expert. They can see everything I'm seeing.
Crazy.
In fact, not only can they see what I'm seeing, but they can point to a particular valve and tell me to open it, or point to a wire and tell me to disconnect. When you think about, you can kind of do that with a cell phone. I can get on a FaceTime call or some other type of thing, and I can hold it up as I'm trying to work, but I'm not occupying one hand with my phone, and I'm trying to do the repair with the other, and this works for about 5 minutes. But what if I have a 30-minute repair, an hour repair? What if it's going to take hours and hours to do? I want to be able to work hands-free, and that's where technology like the HoloLens comes in. So it's a fantastic tool.
And with that in mind, what's the weight on that thing? Is it fairly easy to keep that on your head for several hours?
After I'll put it on, it's very comfortable. Now, no one is wearing these all day long. You're going to put it on, you're going to do a 20, 30-minute call. At no point have I ever thought, oh, this is getting too heavy on my head. It's great for that. The other thing I want to mention is that I showed you devices like, again, this is a VR headset that is now achieving mixed reality by putting these cameras in here.
Mm-hmm.
So it allows me to see the room, but I'm seeing it through a camera and a screen. So I'm not really seeing it with my own eyes. You can imagine if I have this on, I don't have any peripheral vision, right? Outside of the camera range. But with this, I can still have my peripheral vision. I can see the room I'm in. I've seen it with my own eyes. So in our case, when we're working on, pieces of equipment, we want to see it with our own eyes. We don't want to see it through a digital cap.
Well, and what would happen if the camera fails or something?
That's
or
right.
even just glitches for a moment.
And so we call this see-through technology, and this other one we call pass-through technology. So it's pass-through video is how you see it. So
we have Costa Span on the podcast with us to talk about her company, Causation Consulting, can be used for content development as well as management. DEI is something that a lot of companies are finally starting to really embrace. How far do you think we've gotten, and where do you think the future is for companies really getting into the idea of having diverse opinions, diverse folks coming into the organization, and really opening up a more transparent way of building a company, not just from the leadership side of things, but also just from all of the employees?
Yes, I think with DEI, there's always room for growth, right? Just generationally, we have a lot of different generations in the workforce now. And so there's always room to learn and grow from each other. I think social media too, the advent of social media shows how different we are and how different opinions and views can be. So with DEI, I think, corporation or organization, just knowing the values of that organization and really promoting just the workforce being cohesive and collaborative. I think DEI is important because where there's diversity, there's innovation. And all organizations, you want an innovative team. You want a team that can creatively, problem solve problems. And a group of diverse individuals are going to have lots of different ideas, and they're going to come up with something really, I'm sure, great and creative. And so I think that's why diversity is necessary, because really to have a cutting edge and to have just an advantage in the workforce, different people working together on a singular problem, it always produces outstanding results. So yes, I definitely feel, there's always room to grow with DEI, and there's always space for it in organizations.
If you could work with one industry, what would be the most exciting in your mind?
Oh, if I could work with one industry, I would say tech, because it moves so fast. And I love that. I think working in learning and development, in Silicon Valley would definitely, I definitely feel like there are a lot of opportunities there. I mean, whether a startup or an established organization, a tech company focused on learning and development is an exciting, organization to work for. So if I had to pick one, I would say tech. But of course, I've worked in lots of different industries, and they all are very cool. And I feel like anybody working in learning and development is an eager learner. I mean, you have to be to kind of stick it out and stay in learning and development. So I have just a natural curiosity in lots of industries, but if I had to choose one, I would say
We're joined by Katie McLaughlin of McLaughlin Method to discuss experiential learning and how it can make massive impacts to your organization. I also know that it can be really difficult at times to get a group of people in a room into that safe space to make them feel comfortable enough so that they can actually open up and fully embrace the process. So what is your secret to working with folks and getting them to open up and really commit to the process?
So, many folks, when they hear I bring theater into the way that I work, many folks have an immediate oh God, that's not for me. Or ask questions of are people being put on the spot? Are they being required to perform, right? Are there kind of, I don't know, like requirements, to our prerequisites, right? To kind of enter into this. And in reality, we are all performing all the time. And we just don't really think about it that way. We're also all improvising every day.
Yep.
In our interactions. We never know really what's going to happen when we say something, especially to another person. And especially in the workplace, we are performing specific roles, whether that's job roles or there's the social group roles that we're playing, right? Role of manager, role of team or project leader, role of doer, whatever those roles are. And in reality, we have feelings about those roles that we play. And like it or not, despite the fact that it's 2024, we still have this cultural perception in the workplace, especially, that emotions aren't allowed. And that we have to put up this professional front and that certain behaviors and affects equal professional. And in reality, we are all experiencing pretty strong emotions all the time. We are emotional beings and we have to be going to that deeper level of that emotional experience in order to really build relationships that have trust, where we have an openness to share about things that are going wrong, to feel like we can stick our neck out and offer a contrary opinion, call out risks, all things that business leaders want, right? But we struggle to get to. So some of the ways I do that with clients include, we start everything with just fun and some games. Everyone's participating. I never put people on the spot. All of the actions and activities that I do are really group at the same time. Everybody's participating. And that by itself starts to open the door to realize that, okay, I'm not going to be put on the spot. And I've been a facilitator for, at least 20 years. And so in general, I'm pretty adept at reading the room, virtual or in person, and realizing, okay, some folks are maybe not feeling it. So I'll, I'll be the crazy one, right? Or, I'll be the one that's really silly and, raise my hands up in the air and make crazy faces and just be sillier than they are or are willing to let themselves, so they can just start to laugh a little bit and start to let loose and start to connect. And then we can move into some exercises and activities that allow us to go a little bit deeper, build some empathy for each other, and really develop and rehearse some new skills that would be essential for us in the outside of this kind of container of the workshop.
Thanks so much for joining us this week. As always, like and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and don't forget to sign up for our newsletter, The Buzz, to keep up with all things L&D. See you next time.